Welcome to the Sanity Project podcast, where you can awaken your mind to clarity and success even in today's life challenges. We're here to provide insights and solutions that will help you live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hello, everybody. This is Joanne Victoria, welcoming you to another amazing episode of the Sanity Project podcast. You are here to discover a life of clarity, confidence, sanity, and success. And our guest today, Mark Herschberg, is the one to help you. Mark Herschberg is the author of the Career Toolkit, Essential Skills for Success That No One Taught You. From tracking criminals and terrorists on the dark web to creating marketplaces, Mark has spent his career launching and developing new ventures at startups and Fortune 500s, as well as in academia. He helped to start the Undergraduate Practice Opportunities Program, dubbed MIT's Career Success Accelerator, where he teaches annually. At Harvard Business School, Mark helped create a platform used to teach finance at prominent business schools. Mark also works with many nonprofits, including Techie Youth and Plant a Million Corals. Welcome to the show, Mark Herschberg.
Thank you for having me on today. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm grateful that you are here. You've got quite a background, which will make everybody who's listening quite curious. So, why did you write this book, and why are you here telling us about the Career Toolkit?
I came here via a very indirect path. When I graduated from MIT 20-some years ago, I had a bunch of technical degrees, and it was the dot-com era, great time to be in technology, and so I started out as a software developer. Early in my career, I recognized I wanted to move up into management. As much as I enjoy engineering challenges, the people challenges just struck me as a little more interesting. And I realized that if I wanted to become the CTO, it wasn't just about being the best coder out there, the best software developer. Yes, I needed to have those technical skills, but there were other skills I needed. I needed to be a leader. I needed to know how to communicate with the other departments, to understand corporate strategy, how to do a budget, how to hire people. All these skills I had never encountered before in my education. So I set out to learn them and develop them in myself. As I moved up the ladder, I started hiring people, and something very interesting happened along the way. I would ask people a question, a standard interview question, maybe it was on technology for software folks or marketing for marketing people, and they'd give me the right technical answer. They understood their domain and the question I was asking. But then I would ask, what makes someone a good teammate? And they'd be taken aback. I'd get kind of a blank stare because they had never thought about this question before. Or asking about communication or leadership. And no one really thought about these questions. And in fact, if you think about it, none of us were trained in this. When you think back to what you learned in college, maybe you were one of the few who happened to take a leadership class, or maybe you actually have a communications degree, but most of us were never taught these skills. And so I realized I'm asking them these questions. It wasn't just the individuals I was meeting. This was a universal problem. I began to develop some training materials to train up my team. And around this time, this is 20-some years ago, I heard MIT was starting to develop a similar type of program addressing some of these skills. So I reached out to them and said, I've been working on this. Can I be of any help? I said, oh, yes, please. We have some professors developing this, but we'd love to get the perspective, not of just some PhDs, but practitioners. And I helped develop some of the material. And then they said, why don't you stay and teach it? Because again, you're going to provide a unique perspective. And so myself and other people like me who come from the field have been teaching at this class. I've now been doing it for 2 decades. And we've been teaching undergrad students all these skills. But of course, it's not just undergrads. It's not just MIT. And it's not just undergrads who need this. This is universal.
Yeah, and you don't know what you don't know. So you discovered what you didn't know by, hitting a proverbial wall going, why aren't we discussing this or why aren't we dealing with that? And then discovered the audience. So that was great. Perfect timing, certainly when you started doing this, and it hasn't changed since then because you just get new generations of individuals who need to know what this is all about.
Right. And these skills, unlike our domain skills, are fundamental and don't change that much. So in my field of technology, the technology I'm using today, half of it didn't exist 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. The accounting rules today, they're different than what they were 10 years ago. But when it comes to fundamentals like networking, like leadership, it really applies throughout your career. Once you learn it, it's not going to change. Maybe a few of the techniques change. I'm no longer meeting people in coffee shops. Now I'm meeting them on Zoom. But still, the concept of building that relationship and networking, that remains universal.
Yeah. Would you, if we were to apply a label to what you're talking about, would you say that these were considered soft skills?
The commonly used terms, soft skills, some people now call them power skills.
Wow.
We called them firm skills because it has a good play on words there. So it doesn't matter what you call them, but these are universally true.
Yeah, I agree with you, because when somebody was talking to me quite a while ago about soft skills, I said, well, that's every day in a business to me. This is what you need to do. You need to be a leader. You need to know how to do this, that, and everything else. You need to network. And the labels that people give to a group of words never ceases to amaze me. So you call them firm skills. How does that represent the...
We went with the term firm skills. It was one of the directors of the program I teach at came up with that. And first, it's a play on words, right? It's not hard. It's not soft. And so,
okay.
We're very good at the hard skills at MIT. We're like the super hard.
Sure.
And some of the soft skills, I think they can get a little fuzzy. I've seen lists of soft skills, and it's grown so broad. So, for example, storytelling, I see listed as a soft skill. And that is a skill, and it can be useful. And for certain roles and certain people, being able to put in a story narrative is useful. But I'm not sure storytelling is quite as universal as, say, networking. And so I would draw that distinction. That's why I like having this middle, in between the two. And then, of course, firm is also a play on corporate or corporate firms. So she came up with this, really liked it because it's clever. I liked it too. And so that's the term I use. And
the firm is what they call the CIA.
that too.
We're back to that part of your background. So prior to the show, just so everybody knows, we discussed what Mark Herschberg was going to be speaking about, and we mutually chose negotiating and networking. So how can you tell us how important negotiating is in the workplace?
This is one of those skills that we kind of know it's there, we know it's important, but we don't focus on it. Consider networking, which is more common. We've heard this literally dozens of times, right? Since we were kids, we heard networking is so important. But if it's so important, how come no one stopped along the way to actually teach it to us? Mm-hmm. And when we look at negotiating, okay, we know what negotiating is. We're all aware of it, like networking, but we probably haven't been trained in it. And now let's think about the implications of this. I'm first going to do it from an employee perspective, but then we'll also see how it applies to us as entrepreneurs and business owners. If you think about an employee says, okay, I'm going to learn to negotiate, and the next time I go and get a job, they offer me $60,000, but I'm going to negotiate because I've learned a little about this, and I'm going to change that to $61,000. I'm going to negotiate a slightly better deal for myself. Okay, $1,000 on 60, that's not a huge lift. Most companies, if you negotiate the right way, they can do that. What happened to this employee? Well, if this employee just stays at that same job for the next 30 years of her career, what happens? Well, she just earned $30,000 more. One tiny negotiation, not a huge stretch, and she just earned this massive return. But of course, you're thinking that's not realistic. No one sits in a job for 30 years. And you're right. She's going to get promotions. She's going to take other jobs. She's going to get raises. And if she does just a little better on each of those, this can add up to be tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars over her lifetime. And when you look at it that way, you say, wow, isn't this worth taking an online course or taking a local course when we actually go back into the classroom, or reading a book or listening to some podcasts? Isn't this worth a handful of hours to generate tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And of course, as business owners, we know we deal with suppliers, we deal with customers, we deal with partners. Same thing. Now, it might not be a literal, oh, I'm going to be able to get you to pay $1,000 more. Maybe it is. Maybe it's also coming up with a better partnership. Maybe it's coming up with better terms in the agreement. But that ultimately, we know as business owners, translates into real value. And when you do this over and over, you can be generating 5 figures, 6 figures, 7 figures in value for your business. And so look down this light. It behooves all of us to invest some time into improving our negotiating skills. Now, here's the other secret. We're talking about negotiating. We're going to talk about networking as well. And in the book, I also talk about communication and leadership and all these other great skills. Well, it's not quite as direct. You don't suddenly say, ooh, I networked and poof, I instantly got $1,000 more. Networking winds up being kind of binary. Either, oh, I got introduced to this great customer and I got this massive new contract, or it didn't happen, right? And if it does happen, it's not going to be on the spot, meet someone and you do a deal the next day, typically, right? These are more long-term benefits that come to us. Your ability to communicate more effectively doesn't instantly generate $1,000 more for you. But we know over time, having a better network, being a better leader, being a better communicator, this is going to make you more effective, make your business more effective, and it will generate more opportunities and ultimately more revenue for your business. It's just not as direct. So all of these skills, if we think about investing some time in it, again, not being the world's greatest leader, the world's best communicator, but just being a little bit better, going from that 60 to 61 in that employee example, suddenly it has a massive ROI on our entire career and our entire business.
Yes, getting people to invest in themselves is very strategic, because most people think once they have the job, quote unquote, once they have the small business, whatever, that they're done. You know, they apply all of the ABCs to their businesses and then they sit back. And it's a constant learning, in my opinion, constant learning until you're done, whatever that might be for you, whether you sell your business, create more businesses, you know, go to live on a beach in Hawaii, something like that. But you need to be willing to invest in yourself with whatever resources you have available to learn whatever there is out there. It's, to me, that's a natural thing to do, but not to everyone. So you're just saying this investment in themselves, basically, is important. And it can be about money, or it can certainly be about self-esteem, because it's not just about money. We don't work just for the money, although it's important, but we work for other things as well. So have you experienced in your research, in the Career Toolkit book, how people experience learning more? You know, how they feel about themselves? Do they feel better? Do they feel worse?
It is almost always better. I don't think I can recall any examples of people feeling worse. But what happens when you do this is you gain a deeper understanding. You suddenly recognize new opportunities. You suddenly understand situations better. Now, I'll give you an example of that. At MIT, when I was there as an undergrad, networking was a 4-letter word. Networking was really looked down upon. And the reason is because MIT, we are such a meritocracy. Meritocracy, that's a wonderful thing, right? Don't we all want to be in a meritocracy? But MIT, because we're a meritocracy and because we're such a quantitative school, the two together had this interesting effect. When we're in our classes and we're taking a test, we put down however many answers we can. And for example, you might get a 90 on a test and I get an 80. You say, okay, you are clearly smarter. You got more right answers. This is different than if we were analyzing a Shakespeare play, where you can say one thing, I can say something totally opposite. We're both right in our interpretations, and, well, the teacher liked yours better than mine, but it's really fuzzy. Right here, there's an objective set of answers. You got more, you are smarter on that test or in our grades in school. And because we got to MIT by having better test scores and we measure ourselves through test scores, this is our metric. And it's very objective, right? You can't really discriminate on these tests. It's a mathematical formula. So everyone is equal. Well, now what happens when we go to try and get a job? And you apply for this job, but they take me. And one of the reasons you suspect is because I've been best friends with the CEO's son since we were 5 years old. And you're thinking, I have better grades than Mark, therefore I'm smarter than him, and the only reason he got the job is because the CEO knows him. And that, in fact, is somewhat true. Now, you can look at that and say, well, this is underhanded, this is cheating, and that's how it was looked at. Mm-hmm. But once we understand networking, we say, wait a second, yes, he knows me, and what does that mean? He knows that I am a hard worker. He knows I am reliable. He knows I am trustworthy. He knows all these things about me because he's known me for all these years since I was a kid. And he says, wow, I need a smart worker. I'd like to get someone with the highest test scores, highest IQ, but I also need someone trustworthy and reliable and hardworking. And maybe you are, maybe you're not. He met you during the interview and has some type of assessment of you. But for me, there's an absolute deeper certainty because he's known me for years, and that has value. And once you start to recognize this, your model shifts from, okay, I'm just looking for the smartest person, to, oh, the model is intelligence, but also these other attributes, and the network sends a signal to those attributes. And now you have a deeper understanding of how people think about hiring or other types of relationships. I picked hiring as an example. But when you now have a deeper understanding of leadership, of communications, of networking, you can better understand how a circumstance might unfold and how someone might be making their decisions, taking into account some of these other aspects.
Well, I think those other aspects is what helps create relationships. In what you're the example that you're giving now, the relationship was started on a different footing, and there was insight into the character of the person, because I think character is vital. And character, how do you define that? You may have one, but I'm not sure I do. But if I'm speaking to someone and I've known them or known of them through a third party, they're going to have an easier course to get to know me better or work with me easier, because I have some idea about how they function as a human being, not that they have good grades in school. Is that what you're sort of talking about?
Exactly. And to your question of when people learn this and understand this, does it make them happier or less happy? In this case, in this fictional example, you might have been frustrated saying, Mark got through a back door and I'm frustrated. But then you say, oh, now they understand what the network has afforded, that information channel to my character, and that the CEO cares about this and had this awareness from Mark that he didn't have from me. I understand Mark wasn't cheating when he got the job, but instead there was this different set of information. And okay, I've got to use my network when I go out to try and get a job in the future or customers or relationships. If I can use my network to send that signal, it's going to make me more effective in the future. And so again, I think learning this just gives us a deeper understanding and makes us more effective.
And which serves, it's not what you know, it's who you know.
That's one aspect of it, certainly. I think it's a combination of the two.
Yes. I mean, you wouldn't get in the door without what you knew, but how much they knew about you and your character and how you could communicate with others, because you can have someone with the highest degrees in the world, whatever those may be. I'm not aware of them, and there's still a possibility that they would be a twerp. That's the strange word, but that's what came into my mind because I think I was clicking onto politics. Not very highly educated people. So in the negotiating aspect, some people, you're not just negotiating about dollars. You're negotiating about, let's say, vacation. Somebody offers you 2 weeks vacation with that $61,000 bottom line, and you can expand your vacation time because the rules are to be changed. I believe that. So if a company offers you 2 weeks vacation and you're not getting the money you want or the title you want, you can come back with, well, how about giving me another week of vacation, which would cost really not that much to the employer or HR, but it would be something to you, it would be a benefit to you as the employee. Do things like that occur in what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And this is a common misconception. People who aren't trained in negotiation think first everything's in terms of zero sum, right? With that dollars, it's every extra dollar you give me is one less dollar you have. So there's a fixed amount of dollars we're trying to divide up.
Right.
That's different than we'll take delivery times. You might be able to deliver, guarantee delivery by the first of the month. It doesn't really affect you much because you have this giant warehouse of supplies, but that might be really important to me. So that's not a zero sum. It's something you can offer that's valuable to me that doesn't really cost you anything. And then the other aspect that you hit upon, people who are new to negotiations think, well, you want to focus on each thing. Let's first, in the salary example you gave, let's first negotiate salary or maybe price for a contract. Then we're going to negotiate vacation time or maybe delivery schedule. And let's do this one at a time. Because if we try to do all 6 elements, that's very complicated. But in fact, experienced negotiators know you do want to look at multiple things at once. You actually want that complexity because you can do these trade-offs, right? We can trade off money, salary for vacation time, or cost of an item versus delivery time. And that gives us a greater range of options where we might find some mutually agreeable solution that we're both happy with. And so as you learn to negotiate, you learn to do these package deals where you negotiate multiple issues at once.
So do you have insights into what you just spoke about in your Career Toolkit book?
Absolutely. In the chapter on negotiations, we lay out how to be in the right mindset, how to think about your negotiations, and then concrete tips, including ones like this saying you actually do want to do a package. You don't want to take it one at a time. But we talk about the different stages of negotiations and actual steps you can take to improve your outcome in your negotiations.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, I know that's important because most people aren't aware that that's possible. They go in and, we're going for a job with a category X. So you fulfill all of the requirements for category X. You think if you get your salary taken care of where you're both in agreement that is sufficient, but it's not. It may not be, let's put it that way, certainly for you, the employee, because the employer's got into the back of his or her mind, they're willing to let go, give up, contribute a lot. But if you don't ask for it, you don't get it.
And here's
go ahead.
Here's another subtle point for employers. Now, I encourage employers to really train their employees up in all these skills because we all want employees who are better communicators, better leaders. But they think, well, hold on, negotiations. I don't know if I want my employees to be better negotiators because now they're each going to go from that 60 to 61,000. This is going to cost me real money. But in fact, negotiators recognize true negotiation, it's not simply about dividing the pie. Good negotiators know how to expand the pie. And if we're negotiating, I might be able to expand the pie such that I'm going to wind up with an even bigger percentage, but you're okay. Even though now the percentage that I've moved us to is smaller for you, I've made the pie so much bigger, you're still better off. And so employers who train their employees to negotiate, okay, yes, they might do a little better when it comes up for a salary review or promotion. But at the same time, your employees now are negotiating so much better with your vendors, with your suppliers, with your customers, with your partners, with each other, when internally you have a lot of things you have to get buy-in to or agreements or dividing things up. A lot of negotiations aren't formal, let's sit down with a contract, but things we do every day with coworkers. If everyone gets just a little bit more effective there, sure, you might pay them a little more, but now your whole team's so much more effective. That pie got so much bigger, you can give them all a slightly bigger slice.
I totally agree. Absolutely. So as we get to the end of today's presentation, can you leave our audience with 3 steps that they can take right now besides purchasing your book, the Career Toolkit book.com? Besides purchasing that or along with purchasing that, give them 3 things that they can do right now to help them in their career, in their job, in their business, if they own it or if they are an employee.
3 things you can do. So yes, you can get my book. You can also get a whole bunch of other books. And on my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com, I list a number of other books that I reference in mine that will go deeper into these topics. So feel free to get those. Hopefully you get mine too, but if you just want to go right to those, that's fine. I want you to be better and more effective. Second, there is a free app that goes with this book. Because if you think about whenever you read a book like this, you say, oh, great idea, and then you forget it 3 weeks later. And so with the app, it sits in your pocket, and once a day, it's like a daily affirmation. It just pops up one of the pieces of advice in the book, and so that's a reminder to help keep it top of mind and reinforce it. Completely free on the Apple and Android stores, and you can find it, again, from my website, thecareertoolkitbook.com. Then the third thing, and this is probably the most important, there is a way you can train up your employees, your team, your peers, depends on whether you own the company or just part of it. Peer learning is how we learn. It's how we teach at MIT. It's how we teach in business schools. When you want to learn new software, you can sit there and read a book by yourself. When you want to learn leadership, it's best done by having a discussion with other people. How would you approach this? How would she approach this? Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought of it that way. And so you want to have these discussions. And so you want to create these peer learning groups. On the resources page is a free download for how you can create such a program in your company, or if your company doesn't want you to do it, you can find peers, you can find friends, you can set up a local meetup group, and then you can take my book and use it as content. Or if you don't want to use my book, take one of the other books. Take great podcasts like this and have everyone in that learning group read the content, hear the content, and then have that discussion. This is going to have the biggest impact on your learning and development. So that guide is free from the website, thecareertoolkitbook.com, on the resources page, and you can set this up, use any content you want, and that's going to really accelerate your development.
Thank you, Mark Herschberg. This is what I say to everyone. After you've listened to this episode, repeat it. Listen to it again with your notebook, notepad, yellow pad, whatever it might be, because Mark has left you with numerous insights into negotiations. Certainly, we talked about that, but the careertoolkitbook.com. And I want to suggest that the listeners also go to my website at askjoannevictoria.com/podcasts, and they can sign up for a free copy of my book, The True Self Handbook, A Guide to Transform Your Life. So I want to thank Mark Herschberg for being here today with a very thick, content-supported podcast. This is very good, so I'm going to have to listen to it again myself. Thank you so much for being here, Mark, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts. Check out Joanne's coaching programs and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Life-Work Harmony. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.